Today we're going to continue in Hebrews. We're starting in chapter 3 of Hebrews. We're going to discuss 1 through 6. Now, in order to understand what we're talking about, we need to think. We need to try to put our place and think about it as if we were Jews. Are any of you actually Jewish? I know I ask this a lot, but no one yet has raised their hand. So I'm pretty confident that none of us are Jewish. So it's hard for us to maybe fully understand what's about to be discussed. But I want you to try really hard, and we're going to, talk about things a little bit. Because we're discussing Jesus and Moses. So in chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, "And so, dear brothers and sisters who belong to God and are partners with those called to heaven, think carefully about this Jesus whom we declare to be God's messenger and high priest. For he was faithful to God who appointed him, just as Moses served faithfully when he was entrusted with God's entire house. But Jesus deserves far more glory than Moses, just as the person who builds a house deserves more praise than a house itself. For every house has a builder, but the one who built everything is God. Moses was certainly faithful in God's house as a servant. His work was an illustration of the truth that God will reveal later. But Christ, as the Son, is in charge of God's entire house, and we are God's house, if we keep our courage and remain confident in our hope in Christ." So if you recall, the last two chapters, we discussed Christ versus the prophets. We discussed Christ versus the angels. And we discussed Christ's place in that order of things. What did we decide? Christ versus prophets, Christ versus angels. Who wins? Christ wins, right? He is higher, even though he was made to become lower than the angels. He was higher than the prophets. Now, in order to drive the point home, the author of Hebrews pulls out the big guns. This is why I say it's hard for us to understand. For the Jewish people, there is one unified person that their entire nation is built upon. And that would be the person of Moses. I tried to think of some like-minded thing for us Americans, but there's nobody. Those are all in my notes, but Washington, Lincoln, Reagan, Billy Graham, those people all fall short of how the Jewish people feel in regards to Moses, because everyone was unified behind Moses. Moses gave them the law. Moses saved them from Egypt by taking them out. Moses is the one who received the law, who put their government into place, who led them across the desert. If you ask Jews who the most important person in the history of their nation, their answer is most likely to be Moses. So this has to be tackled. This has to be taken care of. It has to be addressed. So, this is why it's important to show Jesus is better than Moses. Because Moses is held in such high esteem by the Jews. He was the man that saw the glory of God. If you look at Exodus 33 and Exodus 34, Moses came down from Mount Sinai without knowing his face was glowing with the law written on the tablets. Exodus 34, verse 29. "When Moses came down Mount Sinai carrying the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant, he wasn't aware that his face had become radiant because he had spoken to the Lord." He was the one who led Israel out of Egypt. He was God's man. But beyond that, the greatest thing in the mind of the Jews was the law, right? That's what we're discussing in all of Hebrew. The law is important, and Moses is the one that gave the law. Moses and the law are seen as the same. In Romans 2:17, this should sound familiar. Romans 2:17, you who call yourself Jews are relying on God's law, and you boast about your special relationship with Him. You know what He wants, you know what is right, because you have been taught His law. You are convinced that you are a guide for the blind and a light for the people who are lost in darkness. Because the Jews had the law that was given to them by Moses, they thought that they were it. They boasted in regards to it. The Old Testament commandments and the rituals were their priority. Moses brought not only the Ten Commandments, but he wrote the Pentateuch, which lays out all the Levitical laws. And so he's the great lawgiver. This is why Moses must be addressed in relation to the person of Jesus. Because Moses' history certainly is remarkable. The hand of God preserved him as a child. The hand of God dug his grave. And during the most memorable parts of history, Moses was there. The whole Levitical system, the whole economy was initiated through Moses. So, now we address Moses. Moses had his failings, and though we see that he was sent by God, remember, he was hesitant. Because he was hesitant, he had to take his brother with him. So, as a result, Moses was not the high priest. Jesus, on the other hand, was sent, and he went without hesitation, without needing to take another to fulfill his calling. And we're actually going to talk about that in a couple months in the chapters 4 and 5. But in truth, he was able to fulfill his calling in full. Moses was a faithful servant. Jesus was a faithful son. Moses was a servant of the house, but Jesus was the builder of the house. Moses was given authority over the Jews, but Jesus was given authority over all things. So I really struggled to try to come up with something that would make us as Americans realize the deep reverence that the Jewish people have for Moses. And as stated, I really couldn't come up with anything. We think of Washington, who's considered, one of the major founders of our country. He was the first president. We think of Lincoln, who helped to rejoin the country after a period of civil war. Many people look fondly back on Ronald Reagan as someone who brought the country together and initiated just one of the greatest periods of the world. I mean, the Iron Curtain fell down, the wall was taken down in Berlin. Some people look at Billy Graham as the great evangelist who has spread the word and unified at least people as Christians throughout the country, but nobody really stands for Americans to unify us as much as Moses unified the Jews. So it is with vital importance that this is addressed by the author of Hebrews. Yes? I actually scratched. But there's no one for us as a society called America, and that's the thing. We can think of numerous people that have shaped different factions of us. The Beatles. Eastern mysticism, yes. So there's numerous people, but none of them come close to how the Jews felt about Moses. They don't hold a candle. But each and every one of us, obviously, has people that we can think of that are of great importance to us, right? We have people that have been a great impact on our lives. Even if it's not somebody that's great in the history books, someone that's been written about and you study in school in those badly written history books, you have somebody in your life that is of great importance that has shaped you. For some of you, that was your father. For some of you, it was your mother. For some, it was a surrogate father or mother, or a friend that came along, a mentor to you, somebody that without whom you would not be sitting here now, without whom you would not be in the place that you are. And by taking that person and comparing them to Jesus, we can see that Jesus is greater than those people that we would place in reverence. The reason that this needs to be done is so that we understand where we should put our faith in, where we can actually be fulfilled in, where God's plan can actually take place, where it can be spread through the Word, where we can be true to what we need to be true to, instead of going out and preaching about the greatness of Josh, or the greatness of Monty, or the greatness of James. We can get to the heart of the matter and speak to the greatness of who Jesus is. We have quantifiable evidence as to the actual person of Jesus. We have historical reference that has been tried to be knocked down time and time again. And every time that it is challenged, the Bible raises to that challenge. The person of Jesus is a linchpin for who we claim to be. Without understanding Him in relation to the prophets, Him in relation to the angels, Him in relation to Moses, or whoever takes that place in our lives, whoever shapes us, gives us our law, that type of thing. Without understanding that, we have the danger of running afoul of the message, of being incomplete. And it's not that these people may not be faithful. Moses was faithful. He had his failings, but he was faithful. He dealt with his issues, but he was faithful. But Jesus is completely faithful. Just as it says, the house was served by Moses, but Christ built the house. Christ is the Son and the Master of the house. So the question that we need to discuss is, where is Christ in our priority of things? It's kind of tough to ask us this question because of our background from the church's inception in 2004 to now. It's really been a priority to think about your relationship with Jesus and to think about your relationship with God and to put into practice those type of things. But that's the question that everybody else is asking. That's the thing that hasn't been settled by the world around us. And that's the thing that needs to be understood, and it needs to be shared in a way that they can understand it. So that is what we need to find a way to be able to communicate, just as the author of Hebrews was trying to communicate to the Jews. So I would like to go ahead and break into our cell groups. And I know this is kind of a heavy question, but it's great for discussion. How do we communicate who Christ really is to those that are around us? Break.